The fluorescent lights of Pinnacle Financial Services hummed their familiar tune as Marcus Johnson adjusted his navy blue tie for the third time that morning. At 28, he had worked his way up from entry-level analyst to senior financial consultant through sheer determination and countless late nights. The downtown Chicago office buzzed with its usual Monday morning energy, coffee brewing, keyboards clicking, and the distant sound of phones ringing in harmony. Marcus had always believed that hard work would speak louder than anything else. His grandmother's words echoed in his mind as they did every morning. "Baby, you show them what you're made of. Your character is your currency." She had raised him after his parents died in a car accident when he was 12, instilling in him values of integrity, perseverance, and quiet dignity that had carried him through Northwestern University and into the competitive world of finance. The morning seemed ordinary enough until District Manager Robert Hayes walked through the office doors. Hayes, a stocky man in his 50s with thinning gray hair and a perpetually stern expression, commanded attention wherever he went. His reputation preceded him, results-driven, uncompromising, and known for his controversial management style that often skirted the edges of what was acceptable in modern corporate America. Marcus had heard whispers from colleagues at other branches about Hayes' tendency to make uncomfortable comments, but he had never experienced it firsthand. Before we continue, tell us where you're listening from today in the comments below. If you enjoy stories with unexpected twists and moments of justice, please consider subscribing. The quarterly review meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock in the main conference room. Marcus had prepared meticulously, as he always did. His portfolio showed a 15% increase in client acquisitions over the past quarter, and his customer satisfaction ratings were among the highest in the district. He felt confident, even excited about presenting his achievements to the district manager. This could be the stepping stone to the promotion he had been working toward, the regional consultant position that had opened up the previous month. As employees filed into the conference room, Marcus noticed the tension in the air. His colleague Sarah Martinez, a fellow senior consultant, gave him an encouraging nod as she took her seat. Jim O'Connor, the office manager and a man Marcus had come to respect over his 3 years at the company, seemed unusually quiet, his usually jovial demeanor replaced by something that looked almost like dread. Hayes stood at the head of the conference table, his presence filling the room with an uncomfortable energy. He opened a leather portfolio and began reviewing individual performance metrics with his characteristic bluntness. One by one, he called on team members to discuss their quarterly results. When he reached Marcus's name on his list, something shifted in his tone. "Marcus Johnson," Hayes said, his voice carrying a subtle edge that made several people in the room shift uncomfortably. "Let's talk about your numbers, shall we?" Marcus stood, his presentation materials in hand, ready to showcase his exceptional performance. But what happened next would change everything, not just for Marcus, but for everyone in that room, and ultimately for Robert Hayes himself. The morning that had begun with such promise was about to take a turn that would expose the ugly reality that had been lurking beneath the surface of their seemingly progressive company, setting in motion a series of events that would leave everyone speechless. Marcus cleared his throat and began his presentation with the confidence that came from knowing his work was exemplary. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes. I'm pleased to report that this quarter exceeded all expectations. I've increased client acquisitions by 15%, maintained a customer retention rate of 97%, and generated over $2 million in revenue for the firm." He handed Hayes a detailed report, each page meticulously organized with charts and client testimonials. His voice carried the pride of someone who had earned every achievement through dedication and skill. "I've also mentored 2 junior analysts and implemented a new client follow-up system that's been adopted by our sister office in Milwaukee." Hayes took the report but barely glanced at it. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and studied Marcus with an expression that made the room's temperature seem to drop several degrees. "That's interesting, Marcus. Really interesting." He set the report aside without opening it, and Marcus felt his stomach begin to tighten with an inexplicable sense of dread. "Tell me something," Hayes continued, his voice taking on a conversational tone that somehow felt more threatening than if he had been openly hostile. "How exactly do you connect so well with our clients? I mean, looking at your client list here." He picked up another document and made a show of scanning it. "I see a lot of diverse names. Martinez Construction, Kim's Restaurant Group, Jackson Community Development. Quite the pattern." The room fell silent. Sarah's pen stopped moving across her notepad. Jim O'Connor's jaw visibly tightened. Marcus felt heat rising in his chest, but he maintained his professional composure. "I connect with all our clients by providing exceptional service, thorough financial analysis, and building relationships based on trust and expertise, Mr. Hayes." Hayes chuckled, but there was no warmth in the sound. Of course. But let's be honest here, Marcus. It's easier to relate to people when you share certain characteristics, isn't it? When you speak the same language, if you know what I mean." The implication hung in the air like toxic smoke. Marcus felt every eye in the room on him, some filled with sympathy, others with shock, and a few with the uncomfortable recognition that they were witnessing something that should never happen in any professional environment. His hands remained steady as he responded, though his voice carried a new edge. "Mr. Hayes, I'm not sure I understand what you're suggesting. My success with clients comes from my education, my work ethic, and my commitment to their financial goals. My Northwestern MBA and 3 years of proven results speak for themselves." Hayes stood up slowly, walking around the conference table with deliberate steps. The sound of his shoes against the polished floor seemed unnaturally loud. "Oh, I'm sure you worked very hard, Marcus. I'm sure you did. But let's not pretend that certain advantages didn't play a role here. Diversity initiatives, affirmative action, you know how it is. Companies need to hit their quotas." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. He had faced subtle discrimination before, the surprised looks when clients first met him, the occasional awkward comments, the way some people seemed to question his credentials, but never anything this blatant, this publicly humiliating. His grandmother's voice whispered in his memory, "Keep your dignity, baby. Never let anyone make you smaller than you are." "Mr. Hayes," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the fury building inside him, "my qualifications and performance are a matter of record. I graduated summa cum laude, I've exceeded every target set for me, and my clients trust me because I deliver results. Nothing about my success has anything to do with quotas or initiatives." Hayes returned to his position at the head of the table, but he wasn't finished. "Look, Marcus, don't get me wrong. I'm sure you're a nice enough guy, but this is a competitive business, and our clients, our real clients, the ones with serious money, they expect a certain level of, how should I put this, professionalism, sophistication. They want to work with people they can relate to, people who understand their world." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat, could feel the collective discomfort of his colleagues, could sense that this moment was a crossroads that would define not just his career, but his very sense of self-worth. What he did next would either break him or forge him into something stronger than he had ever imagined possible. Marcus stood perfectly still for a moment that felt like an eternity. Every instinct screamed at him to respond with the anger that was burning in his chest, to call out Hayes for the racist display everyone in the room had just witnessed. But his grandmother's wisdom ran deeper than his fury. She had prepared him for moments like this, though he had hoped he would never face them. "Mr. Hayes," Marcus began, his voice carrying a calm that surprised even himself, "I think there may be some confusion about the nature of professional competence and client relationships in modern financial services." He moved toward the whiteboard at the front of the room, picking up a marker with steady hands. Hayes frowned, clearly not expecting this response. "What are you doing?" "I'm providing some clarification that might be helpful for everyone in this room," Marcus replied, beginning to write numbers on the board. "You mentioned our real clients and their expectations. Let me share some data that might interest you." He wrote down several figures, client retention rates, revenue generated, and satisfaction scores. "These are the metrics that matter in our industry, Mr. Hayes. And according to these numbers, my clients, regardless of their background or mine, are among the most satisfied and profitable in the entire district." Sarah leaned forward in her chair, recognizing what Marcus was doing. Jim O'Connor's expression shifted from discomfort to something that looked like admiration. Other colleagues began to pay attention in a new way, sensing that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Marcus continued, his confidence building with each word. "You mentioned that clients want to work with people they can relate to, people who understand their world. I couldn't agree more." He turned to face Hayes directly. "That's exactly why Mrs. Chen from Kim's Restaurant Group trusts me with her expansion financing. That's why James Martinez chose our firm over 3 competitors for his construction company's commercial loans. They don't relate to me because of my race, Mr. Hayes. They relate to me because I understand their dreams, their challenges, and their need for a financial partner who sees their potential." Hayes's face was beginning to redden, but Marcus wasn't finished. "You also mentioned professionalism and sophistication. I'd like to think my Northwestern MBA, My Series 7 and 66 licenses and my CFA certification demonstrate a certain level of both. But more importantly, professionalism means treating every client and every colleague with respect, regardless of their background. The room was completely silent now, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Where there had been discomfort and shock, now there was attention, and something that felt almost like electricity. Marcus had transformed the moment from one of humiliation into something else entirely. A teaching moment, a stand for dignity, and a demonstration of exactly the kind of sophisticated professionalism Hayes claimed to value. Furthermore, Marcus continued, moving back to his original position. I think our clients, all of our clients, deserve better than assumptions about what they want or who they can relate to. In my experience, people relate to competence, integrity, and results. They relate to someone who listens to their needs and provides solutions that work. Hayes was clearly struggling to regain control of the situation. Now look here, Marcus, I don't think you understand. I understand perfectly, Mr. Hayes, Marcus interrupted, his voice still calm but carrying new authority. I understand that you believe certain clients have more value than others. I understand that you think my success comes from something other than merit. And I understand that you felt comfortable saying these things in front of my colleagues because you assumed they would agree with you. He looked around the room, making eye contact with each person present. But I think he may have misunderstood something important about the kind of professionals who work here and the kind of company Pinnacle Financial Services actually is. The power dynamic in the room had shifted completely. Hayes, who had entered as the authority figure, ready to put Marcus in his place, now found himself on the defensive. Marcus had not raised his voice, had not lost his composure, had not given Hayes any excuse to dismiss him as unprofessional or emotional. Instead, he had systematically dismantled every prejudiced assumption while demonstrating exactly the kind of leadership and sophistication that truly mattered in their industry. What happened next would determine whether this moment became a footnote in a failed career or the beginning of something far more significant. Jim O'Connor was the first to break the silence. The office manager, a 20-year veteran of the company, slowly stood up from his chair. His face was flushed, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight that surprised everyone in the room. Marcus, he said, I owe you an apology. We all do. He turned to face Hayes, and the respect that had always been evident in his demeanor toward the district manager was nowhere to be found. Mr. Hayes, in 20 years with this company, I have never been more ashamed to be in a meeting. Hayes sputtered, Jim, I don't think you understand the situation here. Oh, I understand perfectly, Jim interrupted, his Irish accent becoming more pronounced as his emotions rose. I understand that you just publicly humiliated one of our best employees based on nothing but your own prejudices. I understand that you questioned his qualifications, his client relationships, and his right to be here based solely on the color of his skin. Sarah Martinez stood up next, her hands trembling slightly but her voice strong. Marcus, I've worked alongside you for 3 years. I've seen how you handle difficult clients, how you mentor new employees, how you stay late to make sure every detail is perfect. What Mr. Hayes said doesn't reflect your work or your character. It reflects his. One by one, other colleagues began to stand. Tom Wilson, a senior analyst who rarely spoke up in meetings, cleared his throat. Marcus, you've helped me close some of my biggest deals. You've never asked for credit. Never made it about race or background. You just helped, because that's who you are. Hayes looked around the room with growing alarm as he realized that his attempt to publicly diminish Marcus had backfired spectacularly. Now wait just a minute, all of you. I think there's been a misunderstanding here. I was simply trying to discuss the realities of client relations in our industry. There's no misunderstanding, Mr. Hayes, came a new voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Rebecca Thompson, the regional vice president, standing in the entrance to the conference room. She was a woman in her early 50s, known for her sharp intelligence and no-nonsense approach to business. Her expression was carefully controlled, but there was steel in her eyes. I've been listening to this conversation for the past several minutes, she continued, stepping into the room. I came by for an unscheduled visit to review quarterly reports, and what I heard was deeply disturbing. Hayes's face went pale. Rebecca, I can explain. Please don't, she said sharply. What I heard was a district manager making explicitly racist comments to an employee, questioning his qualifications based on his race. and suggesting that his success was due to affirmative action rather than merit. Is that an accurate summary, Marcus? Marcus nodded, his professional composure intact despite the emotional whirlwind of the past few minutes. Yes, ma'am. That's accurate. Rebecca pulled out her phone and made a brief call. Karen, it's Rebecca. I need you to patch me through to legal and HR immediately. We have a situation that requires immediate attention. She hung up and looked directly at Hayes. Robert, you need to leave this office immediately. You're suspended pending a full investigation. You can't be serious, Hayes protested. This is a complete overreaction. I was just trying to have an honest conversation about client relations and... Stop talking, Rebecca commanded. Every word you say is making this worse. Security will escort you from the building. You'll hear from HR and legal within 24 hours. The room watched in stunned silence as Rebecca made another call. Within minutes, 2 security guards appeared at the conference room door. Hayes gathered his materials with shaking hands, his face a mixture of shock and rage. As he was escorted out, he turned back toward Marcus. This isn't over, he said, his voice low and threatening. You think you've won something here, but you have no idea what you've started. Marcus met his gaze steadily. I didn't start anything, Mr. Hayes. I just finished it. After Hayes was gone, Rebecca addressed the room. I want everyone to know that what you witnessed today is absolutely unacceptable and does not represent the values of Pinnacle Financial Services. Marcus, I'd like to speak with you privately. The rest of you, please document everything you heard and saw. HR will be conducting interviews with everyone present. As the other employees filed out, many stopping to offer words of support to Marcus, Rebecca closed the conference room door. The real conversation was about to begin, and it would reshape not just Marcus's career, but the entire trajectory of his life. Rebecca Thompson sat across from Marcus, her expression a mixture of concern and admiration. She had built her career on recognizing talent and character, and what she had witnessed in the past hour had confirmed everything she had heard about Marcus Johnson through official channels and industry networks. Marcus, she began, first, I want to apologize on behalf of the entire company. What happened here today was inexcusable, and I want you to know that it will be thoroughly investigated and addressed. Marcus nodded, still processing the rapid turn of events. Thank you, Miss Thompson. I appreciate that more than you know. Call me Rebecca, she said, with a slight smile. Now, I need you to understand something. What you did in that room, the way you handled Hayes' attack with dignity and professionalism, that's not something that can be taught. That's character, and it's exactly the kind of leadership this company needs. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. I've been reviewing your file, Marcus. Your performance metrics are exceptional, but more importantly, your client feedback is extraordinary. Do you know that 3 of your clients have specifically called our corporate office to praise your work? That almost never happens. Marcus felt a flush of pride, but he remained focused on the conversation at hand. I've always believed that if you take care of your clients, everything else follows. Exactly, Rebecca agreed. And that philosophy, combined with the grace you showed under pressure today, tells me everything I need to know about your potential. She leaned forward slightly. Marcus, I'm going to be direct with you. The regional consultant position that opened up last month, you were already on the shortlist based on your performance. After today, as far as I'm concerned, the position is yours if you want it. Marcus felt his breath catch. The regional consultant position would mean a significant salary increase, a larger territory, and the kind of professional recognition he had been working toward for years. But more than that, it represented validation that his merit, not his race, not any perceived advantages, had earned him this opportunity. However, Rebecca continued, I want you to understand what you're accepting. This promotion would make you the youngest regional consultant in the company's history, and the 3rd African American to hold the position. Some people will question whether you earned it, especially after today's incident. Are you prepared for that scrutiny? Marcus thought about his grandmother, about all the lessons she had taught him about perseverance and dignity. He thought about the colleagues who had stood up for him today, and about the clients who trusted him with their dreams and aspirations. Most importantly, he thought about the young professionals who might one day sit in his position, facing similar challenges. Rebecca, he said, I've been dealing with that scrutiny my entire career. The difference is that now I have a room full of colleagues who've seen exactly who I am and what I'm capable of. I have a supervisor who judges me on my merits rather than her prejudices. And I have clients who trust me because I've earned it. Rebecca smiled, the first genuinely warm expression she had shown since entering the room. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. She extended her hand across the table. Congratulations, Regional Consultant Johnson. As they shook hands, Rebecca's expression grew more serious. Now, we need to discuss Hayes. This investigation will be thorough, and there will likely be legal ramifications. Are you prepared to testify about what happened here today if necessary? Marcus didn't hesitate. Absolutely. What happened today wasn't just about me. It was about every employee who deserves to work in an environment free from discrimination, and every client who deserves professional service, regardless of their background, or the background of their financial advisor. Rebecca nodded approvingly. Good. Because I suspect this story isn't over. Hayes has connections in this industry, and he's not going to accept this outcome quietly. But Marcus, I want you to know that you have the full support of corporate leadership. We're not just promoting you because of your performance. We're promoting you because you represent the future of this industry. She gathered her materials and stood to leave. Take the rest of the day to process everything that's happened. Report to the downtown corporate office tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. We'll discuss your new territory, your team, and your future with the company. As Rebecca reached the door, she turned back. Marcus, one more thing. What you did today, standing up for yourself with such dignity and professionalism, that's going to inspire people. I have a feeling this story is going to reach far beyond these walls. She was more prophetic than either of them could have imagined. Within hours, word of the incident and Marcus's response would begin to spread through the industry, setting in motion a series of events that would transform not just his career, but his entire understanding of the impact one person can have when they choose courage over silence. The news spread through Chicago's financial district like wildfire. By the end of the business day, 3 different industry publications had contacted Marcus for interviews. Social media posts from colleagues who had witnessed the incident began generating thousands of shares and comments. The story wasn't just about workplace discrimination. It was about grace under pressure, about standing up for principles, and about the power of responding to hatred with dignity. Marcus arrived home to his modest apartment in Lincoln Park, feeling emotionally drained but strangely energized. The phone had been ringing constantly, and his email inbox was flooded with messages from colleagues, clients, and complete strangers who had heard about what happened. But the call that mattered most came at 7:30 that evening. Marcus, baby, I just saw the news on Channel 7, came his grandmother's familiar voice, thick with emotion. They said some terrible man said awful things to you at work, but they also said you handled yourself like the gentleman I raised you to be. Marcus felt his composure finally crack slightly. Grandma, it was hard, but I kept thinking about everything you taught me. About keeping my dignity, about never letting anyone make me smaller than I am. Oh, baby, she said, and he could hear her crying softly. I'm so proud of you I could burst. But more than that, I'm proud because you didn't just stand up for yourself. You stood up for every person who's ever been told they don't belong somewhere they earned the right to be. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the events of the day, but also thinking about what Rebecca had said about inspiring people. He hadn't set out to become a symbol or a spokesperson. He had simply tried to maintain his professionalism in an impossible situation. But as he scrolled through the messages pouring in from across the country, he began to understand that his response had resonated with people facing similar challenges in their own lives. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the corporate headquarters downtown, a gleaming 40-story building that housed the executive offices of Pinnacle Financial Services. Rebecca met him in the lobby personally, an unusual gesture that didn't go unnoticed by other employees. Before we get to your new position, she said as they rode the elevator to the 38th floor, I want you to know that the Hayes investigation moved quickly. He was terminated late last night, and our legal department is reviewing potential criminal charges for workplace harassment and discrimination. Marcus nodded, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. He had never wanted to destroy anyone's career, but he also knew that Hayes' behavior couldn't be tolerated. Additionally, Rebecca continued, the company is implementing new diversity and inclusion training programs across all districts. Your incident has forced us to confront some uncomfortable truths about our corporate culture, and we're committed to making meaningful changes. They entered Rebecca's spacious office, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. But what caught Marcus's attention were the 3 other people waiting for them. James Chen, the company's CEO, Dr. Patricia Williams, the newly appointed Chief Diversity Officer, and Jonathan Hayes, the company's head of public relations. Marcus, Rebecca said. "We need to discuss something beyond your promotion. Your story has garnered national attention, and we've received requests for interviews from CNN, MSNBC, and several major publications. The company would like to support you in sharing your experience, but only if you're comfortable with that level of exposure." Marcus looked around the room at these executives who, 24 hours earlier, had been distant figures in the corporate hierarchy. Now they were treating him as an equal, asking for his input on decisions that could shape the company's public image and his own future. CEO Chen leaned forward. "Marcus, to be clear, this isn't about using your story for corporate PR. This is about amplifying an important message about workplace dignity and professional excellence. But the decision is entirely yours." Dr. Williams, a distinguished African-American woman in her 60s, smiled warmly at Marcus. "I've reviewed your file, and I've spoken with your colleagues and clients. What impresses me isn't just how you handled yesterday's incident, it's how you've consistently conducted yourself throughout your career. You're exactly the kind of role model young professionals need to see." Marcus thought about all the young people who might be watching, who might be facing their own versions of what he had experienced. He thought about his grandmother's pride, about the colleagues who had stood up for him, and about the opportunity to turn a painful moment into something meaningful. "I'll do the interviews," he said finally, "but I want to be clear about the message. This isn't about victimization or anger. It's about professionalism, about merit, and about the responsibility we all have to create workplaces where everyone can succeed based on their abilities and character." What Marcus couldn't have known was that his decision to speak publicly would set in motion events that would reach far beyond the financial services industry, touching lives across the country and establishing him as an unexpected voice for a new generation of professionals who refuse to accept discrimination as part of the cost of success. The CNN interview aired 3 days later during prime time, and Marcus's calm, articulate response to the incident resonated with millions of viewers. He didn't attack Hayes personally or dwell on the pain of the experience. Instead, he focused on the importance of professional standards, the value of diverse perspectives in business, and the responsibility of leaders to create inclusive environments where merit could truly determine success. The moment Mr. Hayes made those comments, Marcus told the interviewer, "I had a choice. I could respond with anger, which would have been understandable, or I could respond with the professionalism that I expect from myself and that my clients deserve. I chose professionalism because that's who I am, not because of my race, but because of my character." The interview generated over 2 million views online within 24 hours. More importantly, it sparked conversations in workplaces across the country about unconscious bias, professional standards, and the experiences of minorities in corporate America. But the most significant response came from an unexpected source. Dr. Michael Harrison, the dean of Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management, called Marcus personally to invite him to speak at the school's upcoming leadership conference. "Marcus," he said, "your response to adversity demonstrates exactly the kind of leadership we're trying to develop in our students. Would you consider sharing your experience with our MBA candidates?" The speaking engagement led to others. Harvard Business School, Wharton, Columbia, prestigious institutions began inviting Marcus to discuss leadership, professional ethics, and resilience in the face of discrimination. He found himself articulating ideas he had never formally studied, but had lived throughout his career. Meanwhile, his new role as regional consultant was exceeding everyone's expectations. The territory that had been struggling under previous management began showing remarkable improvement within weeks of Marcus's appointment. His approach, treating every client with respect, focusing on their individual needs rather than making assumptions based on demographics, proved to be not just morally right, but financially successful. "Marcus has revolutionized how we think about client relations," Rebecca told the company's board of directors during a quarterly review. His territory has seen a 30% increase in new client acquisition and a 40% improvement in client satisfaction scores. More importantly, his leadership style is being emulated by other regional consultants across the company. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. 6 months after the incident with Hayes, Marcus received a letter from a young woman named Jasmine Roberts, a recent MBA graduate who had been following his story. "Mr. Johnson," she wrote, "I'm a 25-year-old African-American woman starting my career in investment banking. Last week, during a client meeting, a senior partner made comments similar to what you experienced. Instead of staying silent or responding with anger, I remembered your interview. I addressed his comments professionally, focused on my qualifications and the client's needs, and maintained my dignity throughout the interaction. The client was impressed with my professionalism and specifically requested to work with me on future projects. Thank you for showing me that grace under pressure is not just possible, but powerful. The letter reminded Marcus that his experience had ripple effects far beyond what he could see. Young professionals across the country were finding strength in his example, learning that they could stand up for themselves without compromising their professional standards. As Marcus's first year as regional consultant drew to a close, Rebecca called him into her office for his annual review. But this wasn't a typical performance evaluation. Waiting for him were CEO Chen and the company's chairman of the board, William Patterson, a legendary figure in the financial services industry. Marcus, Patterson began, "In 40 years in this business, I've rarely seen someone transform adversity into opportunity the way you have. Your performance as regional consultant has been exceptional, but your impact on our company culture and on the industry as a whole has been extraordinary." Chen nodded in agreement. "We're not just here to discuss your performance, Marcus. We're here to discuss your future with the company. How would you feel about taking on a newly created position, Vice President of Client Relations and Diversity Leadership?" The offer represented more than a promotion. It was recognition that Marcus's approach to leadership, his commitment to excellence, and his ability to inspire others had transformed him from a regional consultant into a company leader whose influence extended far beyond his immediate responsibilities. But the most significant moment of the meeting came when Patterson stood up and extended his hand to Marcus. "Son," he said, "what you've accomplished this year isn't just about overcoming discrimination. You've shown us all what real leadership looks like. You've proven that responding to hatred with dignity, to prejudice with professionalism, and to adversity with grace isn't just the right thing to do, it's the most effective thing to do." As Marcus shook the chairman's hand, he thought about the journey that had brought him to this moment. It had begun with humiliation in a conference room, but it had led to something he never could have imagined: the opportunity to shape the culture of an entire organization and to inspire a new generation of professionals to believe that merit, character, and dignity would always triumph over prejudice and narrow-mindedness. 2 years after the incident that changed his life, Marcus Johnson stood before an audience of 500 business leaders at the National Leadership Conference in Washington, D.C. As the newly appointed Vice President of Client Relations and Diversity Leadership at Pinnacle Financial Services, he had become one of the most sought-after speakers on leadership, professional excellence, and organizational transformation. But tonight's speech was different. Tonight, he was announcing the establishment of the Professional Excellence Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting young professionals facing discrimination in the workplace and promoting merit-based advancement across all industries. 2 years ago, Marcus began, his voice carrying across the packed auditorium, "I faced a choice that many of you in this audience have faced at some point in your careers. I could allow someone else's prejudice to define my worth, or I could respond with the professionalism and dignity that my grandmother taught me represents true strength." In the audience, his grandmother sat in the front row, her eyes bright with pride. Next to her sat Rebecca Thompson, now the CEO of Pinnacle Financial Services, and Jim O'Connor, who had been promoted to regional manager after his courageous stand during that pivotal meeting. "The foundation we're launching tonight isn't about giving people advantages they haven't earned," Marcus continued. "It's about ensuring that merit is the only factor that determines professional success. It's about creating mentorship programs, professional development opportunities, and legal support for individuals who face discrimination in the workplace." The first major donor to the foundation had been an unexpected one, Robert Hayes himself. 6 months after his termination from Pinnacle, Hayes had entered a court-ordered counseling program as part of a discrimination settlement. The experience had forced him to confront the prejudices that had shaped his worldview, and he had reached out to Marcus through their attorneys. "I can't undo what I did," Hayes had written in a letter that Marcus kept in his desk drawer. "But I can try to prevent others from making the same mistakes I made. I'm donating $50,000 to whatever cause you think will make the biggest difference. It's not enough, and it doesn't erase what I said, but maybe it can help someone else avoid the kind of thinking that destroyed my career and hurt so many people." Marcus had been moved by the letter, not because it absolved Hayes of his actions, but because it demonstrated the possibility of growth and change, even in people who seemed most resistant to it. As Marcus concluded his speech that evening, he looked out at the diverse audience of business leaders, young professionals, and community activists. The story I've shared with you tonight isn't really about one incident in a conference room in Chicago. It's about the choice we all make every day, the choice to respond to challenges with dignity, to treat every person we encounter with respect, and to build organizations where excellence is the only currency that matters. The standing ovation lasted for several minutes, but the real impact of the evening would be measured in the years to come. The Professional Excellence Foundation would go on to support over 5,000 young professionals in its first 5 years, providing mentorship, legal assistance, and career development opportunities to individuals facing workplace discrimination. Marcus's approach, responding to adversity with grace while never compromising on professional standards, became a model that was studied in business schools and implemented in corporations across the country. His story was featured in case studies about leadership under pressure, and his techniques for transforming hostile situations into opportunities for growth became standard training materials for managers and executives. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came in a letter from Jasmine Roberts, the young investment banker who had first written to him years earlier. She was now a managing director at her firm and had established a mentorship program based on the principles Marcus had demonstrated. "Mr. Johnson," she wrote, "you taught me that our response to discrimination defines us more than the discrimination itself. Today I'm announcing my own foundation to support young women of color in finance. The courage you showed in that conference room has rippled through hundreds of lives, creating waves of positive change that continue to grow." As Marcus read the letter in his office overlooking Lake Michigan, he thought about the journey that had brought him here. The humiliation he had felt 2 years earlier had been transformed into purpose. The pain had become power. And the moment that could have broken his spirit had instead forged him into a leader whose influence extended far beyond anything he had ever imagined possible. His phone buzzed with a text message from his grandmother. "Baby, I'm watching your speech on C-SPAN right now. Your grandfather would be so proud. You didn't just stand up for yourself, you stood up for everyone who comes after you. That's what real leadership looks like." Marcus smiled, remembering the scared young man who had walked into that conference room 2 years earlier, armed with nothing but his qualifications and his grandmother's wisdom about dignity and character. That young man had believed that hard work and merit would be enough. He had learned that sometimes they weren't enough. Sometimes you had to fight for the right to be judged by your merit. But more importantly, he had learned that how you fight matters as much as whether you win. The incident with Robert Hayes had lasted less than 30 minutes, but its consequences had reshaped Marcus's understanding of leadership, purpose, and the responsibility that comes with overcoming adversity. He had discovered that true victory wasn't just about personal success. It was about using that success to create opportunities for others, to change systems that perpetuated discrimination, and to prove that responding to hatred with dignity wasn't just morally right, but strategically powerful. As the sun set over Chicago, casting golden light through his office windows, Marcus Johnson reflected on the transformation that had brought him to this moment. The humiliation that had threatened to break him had instead broken open new possibilities he never could have imagined. The racist manager who had tried to diminish him had inadvertently launched him toward a level of influence and impact that far exceeded his original ambitions. The young man who had once believed that staying quiet and working hard would eventually earn him respect had become a leader who understood that sometimes the most powerful response to injustice is not silence, but the kind of principled, professional courage that forces everyone in the room to confront their own assumptions about merit, character, and the true meaning of professional excellence. And in boardrooms and conference rooms across the country, a new generation of professionals was learning that dignity and grace under pressure weren't signs of weakness. They were the foundation of transformational leadership that could change not just individual careers, but entire organizational cultures, one courageous moment at a time. What moment in this story resonated with you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this narrative, please subscribe to my channel. Your support means the world to me and helps keep these stories coming.